Hello, everyone. This is Jen Leonard with Colorado Mountain Doulas. I am happy to have Ashley Hellstern with us today from ConceiveAbilities to talk to us a little bit about surrogacy, how the whole process works, how we can better support families who are having babies via surrogacy. Welcome, Ashley, and go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Ashley Hellstern. I'm one of the surrogacy educators with ConceiveAbilities. If you're not familiar with the name, ConceiveAbilities has actually been around for 25 years. We do both surrogacy and egg donation. So what I'm talking to you about today is specifically surrogacy. We have partnered with some of our other doulas in the area and around the nation really to help support understanding and education around surrogacy, knowing that there are so many misconceptions. I often say, much like doula services, there's just so many misconceptions about what's out there and how you can also better support that journey. I don't want to assume anything of anybody, and so I'm going to go a little bit over kind of like high level basics. I'll go through the actual process. We'll talk about the growth of the market. We'll also talk about how better you can, you yourself can support a surrogacy journey, and hopefully in the future be able to capture some of this business in the future. Because again, you are a business men and women and want to get this information out there. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. There is a chat feature in here. If you do have questions, go ahead and pop them in there. I may not be able to like actively get to them, but certainly at the end, I'll be happy to look through those and get some answers to you. So I'll start with just the very high level basics of surrogacy. So surrogacy, when it began back in the day, because the technology and the science were not available yet, the woman that actually carried the baby also used her own egg in the process, and we now call that traditional surrogacy, and we do not do that. We only do what's called gestational carrying surrogacy, and what that means is that the intended parents, those are the people that need the surrogate, you'll hear that reference, sometimes we call them IPs, they create an embryo via their own DNA, or they could have a donor of some sort, whether it's an egg or sperm. They create an embryo at an IVF clinic, and then that embryo is transferred to the surrogate. So she has no genetic or legal connection to the baby whatsoever. So even in the case that, let's say, the intended parents do need an egg donor, they would never use the surrogate's egg, because then that would fall back to traditional surrogacy, and we don't do that. So again, gestational carriers are not genetically connected to the baby. That's, again, your very high level overview. When it gets down to the actual process portion, so if you have somebody that is, let's say, going through a journey or wants to go through a journey or wants to learn more, I want to help educate you on the actual process. So the way it works is, and I can only speak for our company and how it works, but the way it works is they can click through a link that we have available. They do an online screening, very basic information, and then they schedule a phone screening with our surrogacy engagement team where they go through a longer call where they'll start to collect more information from them, like what we call our matching points. So matching points are like preferences for the journey, because we do believe that this is just much their journey as it is the intended parents. And so they go through this phone call, and we determine at that time if they potentially would be qualified to become a surrogate. If that is the case, they keep moving through the process where we'll collect medical records, we do background checks, we do credit checks, and then it ends with a mental health evaluation conducted by our mental health professionals on staff. That's usually a phone call with them and their partner, if they have a partner, to make sure that they understand what's going to be involved with this journey and the expectations going forward, and that they're comfortable moving forward. Once that happens, then they are ready to be matched. So on the other side, we have an intended parent pool that is really just waiting to start their journey for when their perfect surrogate comes around. We do have a pretty large pool of intended parents currently. This is why a lot of this education is happening, because of really a lot of it because of COVID. And there was a backup in the system for IVF clinics being closed down. Plus, I think it's also becoming part of this flow of the market that it is growing in a very meaningful way. And so as our intended parent pool grows, that means that we also need to have really amazing surrogates coming through and being able to help them. So once they get to the point of actual matching, I almost think of it as a match.com, if you will. So we look at the surrogates preferences, the intended parent preferences. We also have to consider two other factors, which is what state the surrogate is in. Also, what IVF clinic the intended parents are using. So there's kind of like a prong approach, if you will, on how we match people. So that way we make sure that they are being matched for the best possible journey going forward. So once we feel like we do have the best match, the way that works is we set up a phone call with our surrogate intended parent, and that is conducted by our match managers, where they'll get to know each other a little bit more, learn a little bit, again, more about the process, about each other, about the journey you had to get here. And then hopefully both parties have all the warm and fuzzy feelings after that call, and they are ready to move forward. We do have to have both parties give their sign up to move forward. If that's the case, then they go to the legal process, where in our case, we do have a lawyer that works with both parties. They're separate lawyers, so they each have their own lawyers, and they work through a contract. So they work through a contract with each other to understand every possible situation that could be out there and what their understanding is and what they are comfortable with going forward. Right around the same time is where they actually start their IVF clinic appointments. So they have to, the surrogate will have to go to the IVF clinic for an initial medical checkup. So usually they're doing some blood work and ultrasound. They're getting to know the IVF clinic better. Then they go back home, and sometime around 1 to 2 months after that initial medical checkup, they'll start some medications in that time frame based on their own checkup with the IVF clinic. They'll determine what medications are needed. And then they'll go back out to the IVF clinic for their actual embryo transfer. Once they have their embryo transfer, they go back home, and the remainder of pregnancy really is back home. So they're doing back home. They'll check back in with usually an IVF clinic near them. Then they'll be released to their OB, and then it looks very similar to their own pregnancy, minus they have this really great relationship with these intended parents that they're going to be talking to and sending all the fun pictures to. So when people ask, especially surrogates, like, I'm not sure how this is going to be compared to my own journey. In many ways, I say it's going to look very different. Just even in most cases, just getting pregnant, is going to look very different because you're going through an IVF process. But, again, for those that have maybe gone through IUI or maybe did go through IVF and were able to achieve pregnancy, it will look a little similar in that way. But because you're developing this relationship so early on in the process, you really know these intended parents in a very deep and meaningful way. So you're sharing all this information with them. In most cases, or we try to have actually the parents there for the embryo transfer if they're able to make it. So we do make sure that they are there and are ready when it gets time for the actual delivery. So one of the things that we do, I'll talk about a little bit later on, is actually the birth planning. So we do develop a birth plan for both parties and help them understand kind of what that expectation is, where a doula may not be available, or maybe they didn't hire a doula for their service. We do try to provide some guidance around that, but I think it is really important, whether you're working with somebody that is going through an agency or maybe they're doing an independent journey. Sometimes you hear it called indie journey. They, for sure, I suggest going through a birth plan for them, because this could be a new experience for them, having different people in the birth room with them, as well as intended parents. And many times they are first-time parents. So not knowing what their place is, how can they best support, and just kind of walking them through that process and understanding what that expectation is on the day. Once the baby does arrive, in most cases, based on the hospital's availability, they actually will have 2 separate rooms. So the intended parents will have their own room, and then the surrogate will have her own room to start healing. I will say most surrogates say that healing process is a bit quicker, knowing that you're not having to take care of a newborn baby, but that's not everybody's case, of course. So we actually have a really fantastic 4th trimester care program that we developed that keeps the surrogate involved in our community of surrogates for an additional 2 months. So we have medical staff available. We also have mental health professionals available that check in on them to make sure that they are feeling supported in that 4th trimester, knowing that the birth is not the end. You do need additional support. And again, that's another great opportunity for doulas really to come in and help, not only on the surrogate side, but also the intended parent side. So that's kind of the high level overview. Again, just to reiterate, intended parents are called IPs. Surrogates can be called surrogates, or sometimes we hear GC, which is gestational carrier, gestational surrogate. So that's generally the overview for the actual process. Now I kind of want to talk about the actual growth of the market. So the surrogacy market, which is probably not surprising because I think it is becoming a little bit more normalized in the market, which is, again, something that we're very happy about. If you think about 10 years ago, IVF really wasn't normalized in the market. And now you say IVF and you really are, it's kind of like a badge of honor now that you are an IVF warrior. And I think surrogacy is leading that way. They're predicted over the next 5 years to have double-digit growth in the surrogacy market. I think there's multiple reasons for that. One could be just the fact that I think that people in general are just waiting longer to have children. They're trying to develop their careers a little bit in their younger years, and then they're waiting to have children, and maybe they're having struggles to actually have achieve their parenthood. So surrogacy steps in for that case. And again, there's multiple other reasons. It could be single parents. It could be those parents that we have several intended mothers that have gone through cancer treatment, so they're not able to have a child of their own going forward, or maybe they're just unfortunately not able to achieve pregnancy on their own. So again, there's many different stories. They could be same-sex parents, but surrogacy is one of the highest and best success rates for actually achieving parenthood, which I think is really important to talk about, and again, to educate your communities, because again, there could be both surrogates and intended parents out in your communities, and just having just the base level knowledge may help give them additional assistance that they need to feel comfortable to go forward and research it for their own. There are a few states that surrogacy is not technically legal. I say that with like a caveat. It's really not legal to pay somebody to be a surrogate in some of these states. That's something that we don't feel comfortable with. We believe our surrogates should be paid. It is a literal labor of love. So we actually don't work in these states, and you'll find most agencies don't work in these states. And that's Louisiana, Nebraska, and Michigan. So if a surrogate is coming out of those states, that's not one that I would say is a high likelihood to be working within the surrogacy market. Of course, again, there are people that do independent journeys, and the way they go about it is their own business. But again, for the, I would say almost all agencies, they're not going to be working in those 3 states. So what does this mean for your business? So the first thing I really implore all of you to do is to go on your page, whatever page you may have, whether it's Facebook, whether it's an online platform of like a website, and see if surrogacy is listed on your page. You probably know this already. If you don't know, you can Control F and type in surrogacy and see if it's listed. If you're not listing surrogacy on your page, you're not being found by other people that are looking for surrogacy journeys. So if somebody's typing surrogacy doula, they're not finding you. And I say that with also saying, not just say, I support surrogacy journeys, like having meaningful content is really important. And if you need assistance kind of creating that meaningful content, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help to understand, again, some of the things that we're going to be talking about here, as far as what does that look like, as far as how can I assist you in your journey, whether you're a surrogate or an intended parent, and maybe listing out the 2 options for each side. In many cases, we actually have doulas that each journey has 2 doulas. So they have a doula for the surrogate, and they have a doula for the intended parents, which I think is really smart, especially in that birth time. The surrogate needs their own time to heal, and again, through that journey and through the birth process, to understand and feel supported. The intended parents need a lot of support because this potentially is a new journey for them. So it is really important to understand, not only during the birth process, the birth planning beforehand, and the postpartum after. And I think that you could provide such a wealth of knowledge and expertise in this field that it could give them that extra, I jokingly say, like the warm blanket feeling, like everything is going to be okay, and that they could feel good going forward, knowing that they are going to be supported. So again, when it comes down to supporting surrogates and intended parents, it kind of there are commonalities between each of them, but there are things that are a little bit different. So for the surrogate, something that may be different for them is the IVF process. So if you already do some type of IVF process or doula services around that, this is the great thing to highlight, especially within the surrogate side, to understand, what does this process look like? What are the medications that you're going to be using? We have a really great section of our website that talks about some of the medications that they use and why they use them, and how it preps their body for embryo transfer. I know that we have some people that have done egg donation, and they ask, is it similar? It's a similar process, but it's different medications. They're triggering your uterus versus triggering your embryos. Triggering your ovaries. So it's just something that we really try to help educate them on. But again, having somebody that's actually been there, done that, or even understands it is a really great resource to them. It could be on the intended parent side through the IVF process, understanding, again, their role on that big day of embryo transfer, understanding what is going to happen because they're nervous as well. As I mentioned, many of these intended parents have come into this journey with numerous losses and numerous miscarriage occurrences, which is just absolutely heartbreaking. I've had one miscarriage in my life, and it's still the worst day of my life. So to hear some of these intended parents say that they've had 8 miscarriages, I'm not sure how they keep going with it. And again, I absolutely think that this is the hope for them to go forward. So being that support for them is just so, so important, and helping them understand that you are there and you are kind of that solid rock for them in this process is just so important. And again, maybe it's just going through the journey and understanding like what are those next steps in the journey. So, hey, look, you just did your IVF clinic appointments to do your initial medical checkup. This is what's going to happen next. Again, not all agencies are created equal. They don't necessarily give them a schedule like we do to say this is what's happening. So you're going to start your medications, and potentially this is when you're going to have your embryo transfer. These are some fun things that you can do at your embryo transfer. So the pineapple is kind of synonymous with having sticky uterus. So maybe it's buying pineapple socks, or they have really cute shirts that you can buy that says like eat, pray, transfer day. So maybe it's that, just giving them something fun to do. We also have different things like there's a superstition that you're supposed to eat McDonald's French fries after the transfer. I don't think there's any kind of like medical reasons for that. I think it's just like a superstition. But again, sometimes that makes people feel better, like they're doing everything they possibly can to get ready for that embryo transfer. And again, maybe it's just going through the actual journey with them. So sometime around, I would say that 20 to 25 week mark is usually where we're doing the birth plan. So the birth plan for us is really important. And I think, again, you being the experts in how to create a birth plan are going to be such a fantastic guide for them in this process, especially understanding that there are a lot of potentially new things going on here. So the surrogate is going through this process where at the end, she's going to be giving this baby back. We don't say give the baby up because it was never hers to begin with. So she's going to be giving this baby back to the intended parents. She is also potentially going to have these parents that are in the room with her that she's not used to having other people in the room with her. What does that look like? And talking through the process of, do the intended parents want skin to skin first? That's very important, and what's something that we definitely talk to our intended parents about. We normally suggest it. So in that case, talking to, if they're in a hospital, talking to the staff members and saying, do not place the baby on the surrogate's stomach because we don't want skin to skin with the surrogate. We want skin to skin with the intended parents. We have a lot of surrogates that will go through the journey and they'll actually have a blanket kind of over them. So that way when it gets time for delivery, if they do have to put the baby down, it's not skin to skin. It's also really important to talk about language. So this is like one of my big things that I talk about is language and understanding what language to and to not use. I know a lot of hospitals and even doulas and birth workers are getting away from like the generic mama. And I think that's a good thing, especially in this case, because I know that a lot of times we get busy and, whether it's nurses coming in or whoever's coming in and, oh, hey, mama, how you feeling? The surrogate is not the mom. In many cases, the intended parents potentially are there, and that intended mother or intended dad are there, and they are the parents. So we don't, and in many cases, the surrogate is actually correcting them and saying, I'm not the mom, those are the parents. And again, we don't want that blurred line of like, this is your child. In no way, shape, or form, they understand this from the very beginning. This is not their child. And they are like, I am done. I am ready to hand this baby over to the parents that want this child. So kind of eliminating that from your vocabulary. If you're not sure what to call them, ask them. It's okay. Just ask them, hey, what do you want to be called? Is there something specific? Sometimes it's just their name. And I know that's just basic. Just understanding of like just calling somebody by their name. But again, it's reiterating that I would say more specifically through the hospital system and saying, hey, this is a surrogate journey. It looks a little bit different. Please don't come in and say mama because she's a surrogate. She is not the mom. Her name is whoever. Just so that way, again, they're understanding that, you're understanding that, the community is hearing it and knowing that that's the best way to go forward. Again, with intended parents, it could be intended mom, intended dad, it could be their names. Again, whatever they feel comfortable with. I always say, if you're not sure, ask. That is the easiest way to make everybody feel comfortable with the situation. Again, when it comes to skin, we very much, want the intended parents, if they are there, to have that skin to skin interaction. And again, setting that up beforehand to make sure that everybody understands that, and knowing that we're not going to place baby on the surrogate stomach. Another thing that we talk about is breastfeeding. So we highly suggest, and do not offer in any way kind of guidelines around specifically the surrogate breastfeeding. We do not suggest her breastfeeding. We actually we suggest pumping if she wants to provide her milk. And in many cases, again, this is where a doula can step in, especially beforehand, and maybe they're inducing lactation through the intended parents, the intended mother, and assisting with that case and being able to help the intended mom be able to start latching right at the hospital and building that bond. When it comes to pumping, it's up to the surrogate whether she wants to pump or not. So the way we look at it is it's kind of like, if you will, a ball going back into the court. So it's in the surrogate's court to decide whether she wants to pump. If she does, then it goes back to the intended parents, say, okay, would you like to purchase this milk? So the intended parents are purchasing the milk from them. They are normally receiving somewhere around $350 a week for their milk that they provide, and then they pay for shipping costs. And so the intended parents have that ability to say, yes, we do want the milk, and determine the length of time. So again, it's based on the length of time that the surrogate is willing to pump. Sometimes the intended parents say, you know what, we just want the colostrum in the hospital and that's it. That's okay. We have some intended parents that are like, we'll take it as long as she's willing to offer it. And that's okay too. We have some surrogates say, no way, no how. I didn't do it for my own kids. I don't want to do that. And that's okay too. We understand that in the journey, and that's considered one of those matching points. So that way we can understand, again, we don't want to force anything on anybody. And if this is something that you want to provide, fantastic. Intended parents, is this something that you would like to purchase for your child? Of course, there are numerous other options for breast milk. Of course, there's milk banks. We're doing a lot of work right now with the milk banks. You can purchase from them. I highly suggest going through the milk banks unless you're going through a very trusted source. I know we have other doulas that have community of women that provide milk to their other clients. Again, if that's the case and they're a trusted source, then I think that's great. But there are other options out there where if they would like to purchase breast milk, they could purchase it, even down to, for-profit milk banks. So there's different for-profit milk banks as well that provide a product, really. It's more of like, I think of it as like a squeeze pack, that maybe it's more calories or a specific diet that's needed. They have specific requirements around their guidelines that are a little different than other milk banks. So in the postpartum assistance, so again, in the surrogate side, in most cases, I actually had a surrogate that just delivered this weekend, and she was released from the hospital within 24 hours and went to her son's game that night. So she's a 3-time surrogate though, so she knew what to expect, understanding kind of in that day, what's going on, how are you feeling, how's everything going, and I will say most of the time we're hearing, especially in that last month, like, I'm ready for this baby to go to their intended parents because they're ready to get their sleep back. They're ready to have that family time back. They're ready to go back to life as normal, or at least where they were before being a surrogate. But that's not always the case. So again, making sure that you're checking in with them to see how things are going. On the intended parent side, there's probably more of a need on that side, I would say, especially for first-time parents. They're worried about bonding with their baby, even though that in many cases, this could be a genetic connection for them. Maybe it's not. Maybe they did need a sperm or an egg donated, and they're concerned about that bonding process. So again, helping them through that process and knowing the different techniques that you use to help them bond with their baby. Or again, maybe it's just a first-time baby and you just don't know what to do. Like, I remember my first-time child and just not knowing what to do, and like feel like I was doing it wrong, and just supporting them and with kind words and letting them know that it is okay. I hope that was helpful to everybody and kind of understanding the process, how you can better support. One of the things I did want to talk about is the actual surrogate compensation. So it varies based on agency, but I will say that surrogate compensation for us goes up to $72,000 for a surrogate journey. That's somebody that is a first-time surrogate, and it varies based on location. So certain states that have better reproductive rights, like Colorado, for instance, has really great reproductive rights. They actually have a higher compensation there because it's much easier to work with surrogates there. The way the compensation is normally broken out is they receive right around $4,000 right around the point of embryo transfer, and then the remaining balance, so let's say it would be 68,000 if they had that 72,000, is split up into equal monthly payments that they just start to receive sometime around 2 months or the second confirmation of fetal heartbeat. So they start to receive those equal monthly payments, and they would potentially also have a post-pregnancy payment. If they do actually end up having a C-section, they do receive additional money for that. That is one of the things I wanted to mention, is that just the basic like high level qualifications of being a surrogate. So you have to be between the ages of 21 and 43, be a US citizen or permanent resident, and have had a healthy or non-complicated pregnancy and birth. And then also not living in one of those 3 states that I mentioned is really important. It is okay if you've had a C-section, you can actually have up to 3 C-sections. Yes, I also love that it's now 43. Again, I think it's going with the times and understanding that people are starting to have children later in life and that it is still healthy. Again, not for everybody. This is not, and I want to say that again, this is not for everybody, and I understand that. That's okay. But yes, you can have actually up to 3 C-sections and still qualify. A lot of times I hear people say, well, I've had my tubes tied. That's okay. We don't want your eggs. You keep your eggs. We just need a healthy uterus. So it's absolutely okay if you've had your tubes tied. It's also okay if you're a single parent. You know, I've heard other people say that. You know, I'm a single parent. I don't think I qualify. Totally fine. So I normally suggest for people to, if you want to find out if you're qualified, we have a really easy 2-step process. Like I tell everybody to do this. If you've ever considered even becoming a surrogate, find out if you're qualified first. And again, the 2-step process is the online screening link, and then we have the phone screening. There's no cost to them. There's no obligation. You're not going to be like caught in a system where we're constantly going to be reaching out to you or anything like that. I will post a referral link in the chat just so that way y'all have it. And I'll also post it on the Facebook page. So that way, if you want to be able to do the screening or know somebody maybe that would be interested, feel free to pass that along. Another resource that I want to make sure to mention, because I think it's phenomenal, is our Surrogacy Learning Center. I'll also post that in there. We created this really great Surrogacy Learning Center that is not only for current surrogates, it's for past surrogates, it's people considering surrogacy. So we do talk about doulas on that page. We also have other, acupuncture and chiropractics and health and wellness. And it really is just a really great page to take a look at. If you're trying to stay current within the surrogacy field, I highly suggest you joining in. It's free to join in. And I think that's all the things that I had. I did see a question come through. Let's see. Does previous number matter? Is there a limit? That's a great question. So you can have actually up to, the question was how many pregnancies you can have. So you can have up to 6 pregnancies, or actually technically you can have up to 5 pregnancies. This would be your surrogacy journey would be your 6th if you were qualified. I think technically the total number is like 10 babies, meaning that you'd have to have multiples within that. That's usually not one that we get very often. That is a really good question, because I know that we have, again, a lot of women in the different communities that are fertile myrtles, which is great. Again, we want your uterus, not your egg. So, but in that case, again, we for sure, if they are able to or want to find out if they're qualified, then it's a great way to put that information out there. Are there other questions I can help answer? I hate being like a talk track and talking the entire time, but is anything that I didn't cover that you feel like would be helpful for you? Pregnancies or births? That's a great question. So it's actually births. That's a good point. So it is births. So 6 births. I will say a question that comes up quite often is about, what does uncomplicated mean? I will say in most cases, really the pregnancy and birth of the last pregnancy and birth is the one that we're looking at. I say that because let's say you've had 3 children, your second one was maybe your complicated one where you ended up having gestational diabetes or something. It was all, ended up being okay. And, you were able to birth a child, and then you got pregnant again. You didn't have gestational diabetes that last pregnancy. That's really the one that we focus on. So if you've had preeclampsia in your last pregnancy, that's tends to be something that is a disqualifier. Gestational diabetes can still be qualified in your last pregnancy if it's diet controlled. Some of the other big ones, really one of the things that we really consider as well, because I do think it's very important, is like, what kind of support system do you have? So do you have a support system around you that is able to assist, that if you do need to go to these appointments, if you do need to go to IVF clinics, if you have children at home, who is helping support in this journey, not only physically support, but also emotionally support. So that's something else that we do consider. And that's what we talk about in the screening call as well. That's a great question. Anybody else have any other questions? No? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add the Surrogacy Learning Center link in here. And like I said, I will also add it to the Facebook post. So that's the Surrogacy Learning Center. If you are interested in finding out, or if you know somebody that is interested in finding out if they are qualified, that link that I just posted is literally like the easiest way to get information through. What kind of insurance plans are required? Oh, great question. So there are actually many different insurance plans that we work with. In most cases, so for instance, I'm a military spouse and I have TRICARE. TRICARE does not cover surrogacy. That's okay. With our agency, the way that that works is that the intended parents would purchase you a policy to cover the journey. So excuse me. So they purchase a policy to help cover your journey. For instance, again, in my case where TRICARE does not cover surrogacy, I still keep my plan. So I would still use it if I had to go, let's say, to my primary care physician for a cold. I would still go to them. But when I would go to my OB or be released to my OB, I would need to have an OB that is covered by the plan that the intended parents purchased. Again, it's for our agency, it's not an issue if you don't have insurance, because again, we have that plan option for them. What about cannabis use in legal states? That's a great question. So most of this falls back to the IVF clinics as far as their requirements, I would say. Pre-existing use, I'll say it depends. There is a line, and that is a really good question. And it really depends on the IVF clinic that they're using. So in most cases, we're actually trying to find IVF clinics that would be okay with this. During pregnancy is definitely a no-go. Pre-existing and or feeling like they're going to need it for a current pregnancy is a no-go as well. I would say in most cases, if it's like occasional use and definitely not later on in the pregnancy, I've seen that approved. But if it's been used all the way through your pregnancy, I tend to see that being more of rejection. What part of Texas are you in? I am in McKinney, Texas. I'm just north of Dallas. So Jennifer, I don't know if you're in Texas, but howdy.
I'm from Texas originally.
Oh.
I just was curious kind of what the doula scene was actually like, but I'm sure down in the Dallas Metroplex, it's a little more popular than it was in Amarillo.
Yes. So Amarillo, for those that are not aware, is a bit like West Texas, kind of, I would say not as populated, obviously, as Dallas, Texas. But yes, we do. We have a few doula companies that we work with down here in Dallas. Houston does have a big market as well, but definitely around the Metroplex area, for sure, the doula services around here. Although, like, I often hear there's not enough doulas out there, even from like states like Colorado. So yeah, there's always education needed. I jokingly say that I wish in my own deliveries I would have had a doula, because with my first delivery, I waited until the doctor got there, which was like 45 minutes of waiting with my child in the birth canal. And I was just scared that the doctor wasn't there, and I needed a doctor there. And I wish a doula would have been like, it's okay. The nurse could, I can catch, it's okay, because my son ended up having low oxygen out when he was delivered. And so he had to go to the NICU for a day or so. And so I 100% support the idea of having a doula, not only during pregnancy, especially during the birth process, especially for new parents and those going through a new experience like surrogacy or being a new parent, because it is scary. It's scary, but you being the wealth of knowledge that you are, gives them that warm blanket feeling of like, this is okay, we're going to do it together. What aspects of the birth plan are you generally on legal contract versus agreeing to discussing before the GC? during pregnancy. What is a birth plan? Are you generally okay? So, so legally, I would say we're talking. So they were asking about birth plan. What kind of things are we discussing and agreeing to? Birth plan wise, I would say the big one that we talk about most, which is like kind of the high overarching, is really termination and reduction. That's something legally that we do talk about, and that they do agree to. So we asked the surrogate, what is she comfortable with, and we have kind of three different I don't want to say scales, but like levels of, if this happens, if it's deemed, not medically viable, or if the embryo is life altering. There's different wordings that they use. So that way the surrogate can say what she is comfortable with. And then again, we match them with intended parents that have the same views. That's kind of the big one that we certainly talk about legally. As far as more birth plan, like hospital day, who's going to be in the delivery room, that's more done after the fact, I would say. So what we truly believe in here is shared decision making, especially in that aspect. So understanding, and educating if the surrogate's like, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with them being in the room, understanding that, what does that look like? This is a shared decision. And maybe, are you comfortable with them staying up by your head only? And if that's the case, then great, they're in the room, and I would say 99.99% of the times they want them to be in that room for the big moment. So they may have many cases where they are not in the room with them. But even in the case of COVID, let's say, because they were limiting the amount of people that could be in the room, especially for like C-sections, the surrogate is the one that actually decides who the support person is. So if she decides she wants her spouse or, husband or whoever it may be, partner in there with them, or family member in there with them, and that's their one support person, that's their one support person. In that case, most times the intended parents are waiting directly outside the room. And then when the baby comes out, they'll wheel the baby out. Intended parents will go in a separate room with the baby, and, after they do all the checkups and everything. But yes, for sure, we again very much believe in shared decision making in this process, but we also believe that each party does have their own voice and their own wants, and that's why that matching process is really important to us to get it right the first time. Hopefully that answered. I'm currently planning on considering possibly surrogate in the future. How long would I have to wait? Great question. This person is pregnant and is interested to possibly be a surrogate in the future. Again, it really kind of depends on the IVF clinics. I normally say usually a 6-month time frame is a good window after delivering to start considering that process. You can find out if you're qualified in that time frame. So I would say get to that 6-month window first, and then you could put in your application to find out if you're qualified. There are, of course, as I mentioned, those additional steps. So you would go through the screening process, and then you could do they do the background check, and they do a credit check, and they do the other different parts of the process. And then you're actually matched. One of the things that I think is really great about us as well is that, again, we believe that this is just as much your journey as it is the intended parents. So let's say, within that 6-month time frame, you're like, I want to make this happen, but I have a trip planned to Disney World with my kids in December, and like that has to happen before I'm pregnant. We will absolutely work with your timing to make sure that we understand your preferences. Again, for that, that's a preference that you want to make sure that you're not getting pregnant until after this trip. Totally fine. We could still go through that whole process all the way up to the point of even being matched, and just understanding that, okay, we're not going to do an embryo transfer or schedule embryo transfer until after that vacation. So again, hopefully that helps that question. I'm curious about statistics of postpartum and GCs. That is a really great question as well. I think that maybe a lot of you are here because there's not a lot of great statistics out there about surrogacy. There have not really been a lot of studies, honestly, that I can find from the surrogate side, especially where it comes to gestational carriers. I feel like there's more in traditional surrogacy, that's where the the surrogate is using her own egg, and she actually is the genetic connection, or she has a piece of genetic connection. With the surrogate side, I don't have a specific number myself. I know that there are many studies out there that have shown, of course, the bond between any type of I would say your typical way of getting pregnant, and the bond of baby and mother in that case. With a surrogate journey, we do take additional steps to try to make sure that that baby understands or can hear the intended parents' voices. So they have belly buds. I've had surrogates actually offer to eat similar food as the intended parents. It's not something that we ask them to do. It's just something that they do on their own. from using the same perfume maybe as the intended mother in that case. So there's definitely different ways that we can help and assist again in that process to really more so, I would say, in the birthing processes specifically, in again having that bonding really right during, right after the delivery and going forward from there as well. Understanding the GC does not share any genetic connection through the placenta, correct? Yes, that's correct. So the GC does not share because she does not share any kind of genetic connection. So the embryo is created at the IVF clinic with, and again, this could be any variation of the intended parents. So in a heterosexual couple, it could be their own DNA of egg and sperm. In a same-sex couple, it could be a donor. Even in a heterosexual couple, it could be some type of donor may be needed as well. It would never be the surrogate's egg, though. So yes, she does not connect or does not share any kind of genetic connection to the baby. And again, this is the part of the human body that I just find fascinating. Whenever you have somebody that has a certain blood type and then the baby has a different blood type because it's within its own placenta and its own little ecosystem, I just find that fascinating because otherwise that would not work in the human body. But yes, that is correct. So they are not genetically connected to the baby. Great questions. Any other questions I can answer? Hopefully this was helpful. I hope, again, your homework for each of you is to go back to your pages and your websites and whatever it may be, and see if surrogacy is listed. And again, make sure that you're listing all of those things like surrogate journey, intended parents. We do, just in case if you have others that are in your community that you think would be interested in this, we do have a really great referral program here at ConceiveAbilities. So if you are like, you know what, I know I have people that are interested in this, I just need to talk to them about it. The way the referral program works is as they click through links, or as they click through your link, as they reach different stages, you're both rewarded. So if they do the application and the application's approved, then you each receive a $50 gift card. The phone screen is approved, you each receive a $100 gift card. And if they are active to be a surrogate, you each receive a $500 gift card. The gift cards are a variety of different things. If it's for your business, we can actually change that to be a monthly check instead, if that's your preference. And again, it's really just our way of like truly thanking you for creating awareness and acceptance around surrogacy, and for helping these intended parents. Even if you're not going to be a surrogate yourself, you can really make a profound difference in some intended parents' life by finding the right surrogate for them. I am serving as a volunteer virtual doula for a friend IVF transfer in Texas. How would I word that experience on my website? If you want to send me so what I will do actually is I will send my email to y'all. If you do have additional questions about how better you can list this on your website, please feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to help. So that is my email address, so that way you have it. Reach out to me. And again, if you need assistance or if you want examples of how other people have listed it, I know that Jem she's going to do a blog about surrogacy, so I can help with that as well. Any type of awareness that we can get out there is great. And again, I think that the celebrity idea of surrogacy is like kind of like a double-edged sword of like, yes, it's great to have the idea that surrogacy is being accepted. But I think that the overwhelming understanding of these are everyday people going through this journey too. Surrogates and intended parents are your neighbors. They may not be comfortable to talk about it just yet, but they are the ones that are potentially in need. So I think, again, putting it out there in a very safe space where people feel comfortable to talk to you is just in and of itself just a wonderful thing.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I appreciate this so much, and we've learned so many things. Great questions from everyone too.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else has any questions. This is being recorded, so I'm going to put it on our YouTube channel, usually within a day or so. So be on the lookout for that, so we can also share it with to anyone else who didn't make it to the call. Anything else that you can think of that we should know moving forward, Ashley, with our businesses or?
I don't think so. Like I said, I think the one big takeaway that I just recently had, we did a meeting with our team, and it was really seeing the absolute expansion and growth of this market over the next 5 years. Like the one thing I hope you could take away with it is that like you could be the thought leaders in this space going forward. And you could really be on like the ground level of something that I think is going to become more of the normal. I say normal, I hate using that word. But it's going to be, it's going to be more of something that I think people are going to really start to consider more and maybe start openly, talking about more. Again, much like the IVF space where 10 years ago, it wasn't really something you talked about. Now it's really something that is becoming open and people are comfortable with talking about it. I think we're going to be there in the next 5 to 10 years with surrogacy. So again, if you're not already kind of building that now, building that understanding and building that trust within the market, you're missing out. So I don't want y'all to miss out, and I want y'all to be able to assist as many possible surrogacy journeys as possible. One thing I talked to Jen about is that we do talk to our surrogates about doulas. We actually do an intake call with them to understand like what kind of services do you potentially need. So it is something that we do get behind, and we do understand that it is important and that everybody has their own role in this journey. And I think doulas can very much play a very important role for both surrogates and intended parents. I may have this beginning. What are the reasons that people use a surrogate? Yeah, so I did mention that in the beginning, but that is a great question. So people use surrogates for a multitude of different reasons. So it could be from same-sex couples. It could be heterosexual couples that are just having a challenging time with actually achieving pregnancy or birth. I was mentioning that, I had just heard from one of our intended parents that she had 8 miscarriages. Again, I don't know what it takes to get through that and to keep going and keep pursuing your path to parenthood, but she did, and she was able to find her surrogate and her right match, and that's the moments that I love, and being able to hold her child's arm in her arms is just wonderful. But it could be a multitude of different reasons. I would say the majority of the times it's that case where heterosexual parents have gone to IVF clinics, have tried to get pregnant on their own, and they have not been able to achieve pregnancy or birth. But again, we have single parents, we have same-sex couples, so there's a bunch of different options out there. But I would say for most cases, it's usually deemed medically necessary, or it would be deemed medically not conducive for the intended mother to get pregnant again.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. It's so nice to have guest speakers. I'm going to go ahead and end the call now. Seems like everyone's gotten their questions out. And then who knows, there might be more questions that pop up in the event as well. So, yeah, but thank you everyone for coming. Have a wonderful day. And yeah. Support those parents.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.